Okay, great. Thank you all very much for coming. I am delighted to see you all here. After 2 years of receiving almost nobody, it's nice to see a room filled with people. And especially on a day like today, which is a day to celebrate. We are delighted and honored to organize this event with the Embassy of Bangladesh. We were honored that we were invited to do this together with the Brussels Diplomatic Academy and the Chair Asia Pacific Studies. I will be your moderator for today. My name is Kim van der Borgt and I am the Chairholder Asia Pacific Studies. And we start our event of today with a word of welcome from the Ambassador. Mr. Ambassador, if I may call you to the stage.
Thank you for decorating me.
Sorry, it's the other way around. It's my new specialty, is decorating our speakers. Is it this way? I have no idea. I think
okay.
This works, yeah.
Okay.
You can hold this, or
Sure.
you can stick it in your pocket.
Yeah, that should be fine. I believe I'm audible. Okay. A very good morning to you all. Professor Kim has just mentioned that this is an in-person event after quite some time. During the pandemic, we got used to a virtual way of life, and we did similar events virtually. It's never the same. There is no alternative to in-person human engagement and interaction. We are thankful to the VUB, particularly the Chair Asia Pacific Studies, Professor Kim, and the Brussels Diplomatic Academy to partner with the Embassy of Bangladesh and Mission to the European Union to organize this, we believe, a seminar to celebrate Bangladesh. 1971 to 2021, a journey of 50 years. We have celebrated the Golden Jubilee of 50th anniversary of our independence. Alongside that, we also celebrated the 100th birth anniversary of our father of the nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. We had an extended celebration since March 2020 and continued till March 2022. We had to move to virtual mode to celebrate the birth centenary of our father of the nation due to this unprecedented and extraordinarily challenging pandemic. I wouldn't make a speech. I know I have the bad habit of doing so, but I wouldn't do it today because we have a, if I may put it very simply, a stellar panel. Literally, you would watch that in a few moments. Our keynote speaker is Ambassador Tariq Karim. I don't dare introducing him. He was a career diplomat for more than 3 decades. He served as ambassador of Bangladesh to Iran, to South Africa, ambassador to the United States of America, and High Commissioner to India. And he's a voracious reader and writer, both. He regularly contributes to international journals, particularly on foreign policy issues, not only on Bangladesh, but also on regional and international issues. He's currently the founder director of Bay of Bengal Center at a leading university, independent university in Dhaka, Bangladesh. I had the honor of serving under him and working with him in our High Commission in New Delhi as his deputy. And I always say that, sir, I would always be your deputy and disciple, the 2 Ds. So without further ado, I would request Professor Kim to moderate the seminar and the ground rules and the housekeeping issues have already been mentioned, or time to time Kim would mention. But thank you all for joining us today to celebrate Bangladesh and also to know from our distinguished speakers. The keynote speaker and the discussants would be introduced by Kim later. And you might have noticed already that except this poor, tall gentleman, I would say, I'm the only representative here who is speaking a few words, is from the government of Bangladesh. None of our distinguished speakers and discussants is representing the government of Bangladesh. So we would like to know from them what they think about the developmental journey of Bangladesh, and alongside that, the geostrategic importance that Bangladesh holds, deserves, and what would be the future in both these areas from them. So thank you very much. Hope you will not only enjoy, but also actively participate in the seminar. Thank you. It's okay, Kim?
I will liberate you.
Sure. Thank you.
No. You were only partially liberated. Those are the technical challenges of organizing such events, because this event is also being recorded as a webcast and can be viewed later after the event, so we have to capture also the sound. Mr. Ambassador, may I invite you to deliver the keynote speech? I will also have to catch you with this contraption.
Mm-hmm.
If you allow me, I can stick it in your pocket so you don't have to carry it. That should do it. So I need some water.
That's fine, thank you.
And you have the floor.
Thank you very much, moderator. Am I audible?
Yes.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. And as we say in Bangla, Shubho Shakal. Ambassador Mahbub Hassan Saleh, Ambassador Renzi Thering, Excellencies, Moderator Professor Kim van der Poort, distinguished panelists Professor Yaqub, Mr. Oldmakson and Ms. Khan, faculty members and students of the Brussels Diplomatic Academy and Asia Pacific Studies of Vrije University, ladies and gentlemen. I extend my sincere thanks to Ambassador Mahbub Hassan Saleh, Ambassador to the Kingdom of Belgium and head of the Bangladesh delegation to the European Union, the Brussels Diplomatic Academy, the Vrije University of Brussels, for inviting me to this special event and giving me the privilege to speak today and share my thoughts on Bangladesh's developmental journey and geostrategic importance. I congratulate them for organizing this event, which celebrates the golden jubilee of Bangladesh's independence, coinciding with the birth centenary of Bangladesh's founding father, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. This also coincides with the golden jubilee of establishment of Bangladesh's relations with Belgium this year and the eve of 50 years of Bangladesh-EU partnership, which will be in May 2023. When those relations were established, Bangladesh had already been written off contemptuously as a bottomless basket case. And perhaps even I, had I been a political economist standing where I was and looking at what had emerged, I might have shared those views. But that is an epithet that still rankles with us and with me personally today. 50 years later, Bangladesh is a very different country. Before I continue, I wish to make it known that the views expressed here are my own, except for statistics and data which I've taken from international sources. but my views do not represent the official policy or thinking of the government of Bangladesh or the institutions I work in or am associated with. Now, Bangladesh, what was it 50 years ago? On liberating itself on 16 December 71, Bangladesh was, literally to use T.S. Eliot's word, a wasteland. It had a population of over 70 million people, growing at an annual rate of 3.6%. It was among the poorest of the least developed countries, overwhelmingly impoverished, with large proportion living below the poverty line. It was largely an agrarian country. It was unable to feed itself and was heavily dependent on food and food aid from donors. Whatever infrastructure and industrial bases it had before the War of Liberation were destroyed during the 9-month-long War of Liberation. At liberation on 16 December 71, it had literally no hard or liquid assets worth reckoning. Even though it comprised 56% of total erstwhile Pakistan and had earned during first couple of decades of erstwhile Pakistan almost 80% of foreign exchange revenues, unfortunately, 80% of those revenues earned were reinvested not in what became Bangladesh but in West Pakistan. This was one of the major causes of dissent and discontent. As per World Bank statistics from 1972, Bangladesh had a GDP at that time of $6.3 billion, a negative GDP growth rate of minus 14%, and per capita income of under $100. It was only 94 US dollars. It was geographically India-locked, with China located at one stage of separation from it. Located in a very hostile region, it found conflicts raging in the east, the Korean Peninsula and Vietnam, and west in the Middle East. It was born into a sharply divided world by the Cold War paradigm, and I hold responsible for being midwife to the bloody birth of the country. This same Cold War paradigm I also attribute as having been wet nurse to its early politics. The seeds of Bangladesh's strategic importance are to be found within the same paradigm, driven by perception of Bangladesh's geostrategic, unhappy location between two antagonists in the Cold War, India and Pakistan being on opposite sides of the Cold War. Today, Bangladesh has a population of 167.74 million. Its growth rate is just around 1%, whereas by comparison, Pakistan, which had 3.6% growth rate at that time, has a population of 230 million, roughly. Bangladesh is one of the most densely packed countries in the world, with a population density of 1,265 persons per square kilometers, crammed into a total area of a little over 130,000 square kilometers. This gives it a dubious distinction of being the 8th largest country population-wise, with median age of 27.6 years, of which 39.4% is urban. Bangladesh today is set to graduate from LDC to developing country by 2026. According to the World Bank, it is a model for poverty reduction. Its projected GDP for 2022 is estimated at $400 billion, increasing to $430 billion in 2023. Its GDP growth in 2021 was 6.94%, but real growth in 2021-22 is claimed at 7.25%. The projection for 2022 is 6.6% according to the World Bank and 6.9% according to the ADB. While for 2023 it is likely to be 6.3% World Bank or 7.1% ADB. Bangladesh has been among the fastest growing economies during the last decade, not only in the region, but globally. It is ranked 41st largest economy globally, second largest in South Asia, and projected to become the 28th largest by 2030. Today, Bangladesh is not an inconsequential country anymore. It has geostrategic importance, which has catapulted it astronomically, with global focus swiveling now to the Indo-Pacific. So how did we get from there to now? Bangladesh's progressive transition from bottomless basket case in 1972 to lower middle income status in 2015, from LDC in 1972 to developing country status now, almost reads like a fairy tale. It aspires to be an upper middle income country by 2031. Its poverty declined from 43.55 to 14.3% in 2016, while extreme poverty has reduced to 10% and is expected to halve by 2030. Many of its human development indices and outcomes improved, and it has better HDI than most of its neighbors. Its GDP growth steadily increased from 2009, when it was 5%, reaching an all-time high of 8.2% in 2020, before taking a palpable hit from the COVID-19 pandemic 2 years ago. To its credit, the government responded fast and managed the crisis reasonably well, with 75% of the population being vaccinated in the last 2 years. It made strong recovery in the years 21-22, led by a rebound of manufacturing and service sector activities. Sustained exports and rise in private consumption-led growth contributed to this. The transition to an aroused tiger today has been messy and bumpy, with severe body blows to the state by the assassination first of its founding father in 1975, followed by a series of coups and counter-coups and prolonged military rule or quasi-military rule from 1975 to 1990. Between 1991 to 2008, despite return to civilian rule, no one party could consecutively remain in power for more than one term. Each successive party in power would replacing the previous, tended to roll back on what the previous government had initiated, even if that was for the good of the state and the people. Today, Bangladesh has acquired food autarky. It has even extended fiscal support assistance to Sri Lanka last year and disaster management assistance to Maldives. It has had to perforce provide shelter to over 1.2 million persecuted Rohingyas who fled their homeland, Myanmar, since 2017. Bangladesh's impressive transition was supported and fueled by a demographic dividend, very strong RMG exports, continuously increasing remittances from its very large but very productive diaspora working gainfully abroad, and creditable, stable macroeconomic management of its economy at home. With an unleashed and burgeoning private sector, its exports rose by 80% in the last decade, mainly driven by the RMG. Bangladesh is globally the second largest exporter after China. FDI in Bangladesh in 1972 was only $90 million. In 2019, it stood at $3.61 billion. It received investment of over $2.37 billion in 2019-20 and received proposals totaling over $21 billion. Getting its relations with India right and actively pursuing an ambitious sub-regional cooperation agenda, reconnecting lost or disrupted connectivity, and overcoming infrastructure inadequacies are perhaps the drivers of the spurt in interest in investment in Bangladesh. The economy is diversifying, with potentials demonstrated by growth of pharmaceuticals, basic steel, cement, ceramic, and shipbuilding, which is a newly emerged industry, and which marks the revival of an ancient tradition. Many people might not know that there was a time when Bangladesh made large ships, and historically, at least 1 or 2 ships may have been there in the fleet of Nelson, which defeated the Spanish Armada. And I believe the prototype of one ship is in a naval museum in Germany somewhere. I read this only a few days ago. So we lost this industry and our ability to make this a long time ago. Another important factor was domestically opening up investment in several key areas to the private sector, notably communication and energy. The investment to GDP ratio was 31.6% in financial year 2018-19, out of which 23.4% came from the private sector and only 8.13% from the public sector. Access to electricity has increased from 14% to nearly 100%. We have the capacity to provide 100% to all the villages and everywhere in Bangladesh. The gaps are where we have not connected the distribution grid to take it everywhere. But right now we actually generate excess. We have the capacity to generate excess capacity. Access to, as I said, increased to electricity. During the last decade, there was unprecedentedly heavy public spending on major infrastructure projects, notably the Padma multipurpose bridge, the Bangabandhu tunnel, the Rupur nuclear power plant, the Dhaka metro, and notably long neglected upgrading or revitalizing of the railways and reviving inland waterways. There has been continuously heavy investment in education sector. Literacy rate has risen from 26.4% in 74 to 74.7% in 2019. There has been gradual but significant expansion of the health sector. Life expectancy today is 72.6 years compared with 46.6 years in 1972. There have been significant commensurate advances in other related areas as well. Maternal mortality has declined by 75%. Infant mortality dipped from 167 per 1,000 in 73 to 21 in 1,000, which is the current rate. The country posted widespread success in immunization drives. For several years, Bangladesh has been the largest contributor of troops to the UN peacekeeping missions and continues to be so. Till date, over 6,800 personnel are deployed in 8 out of 13 UN peacekeeping missions across the world. Bangladesh, historically prone to frequent natural disasters, has credibly established high disaster resilience. It embarked on an aggressive and concerted drive in last decade and a half to digitization of its economy and services based on achievement of huge ICT advancements. So what enabled us to survive? Our ensuring survivability of the state under very hostile circumstances in a deeply divided world was imperative. This is the first stark lesson which the founding father of the nation had to confront when he returned to liberated Bangladesh after 9 years of incarceration in Pakistan. Bangabandhu well understood that in a post-colonial world into which his newly founded state had emerged, every state is part of a greater community of nations. In order to survive viably, we had to first navigate through very treacherously mined waters and numerous hidden shoals that lay ahead in our voyage as a new state. A visionary foreign policy was among the first priorities of the day in early 1972. And I can say with some degree of humility that I had the privilege and honor of being associated in those early years in the formulation of that foreign policy, which I think, perhaps it's a very personal view, is largely responsible for enabling us to come from there in 1972 to where we are today. A fundamental dictum in foreign policy formulation and analysis is unquestionably this. Each country, as a sovereign, independent nation-state, contextualizes its every move or action within the overall rubric of preservation and advances of its own national interest. These foundational precepts must be buttressed by a hard-nosed pragmatism and understanding of the inescapable reality that while one may choose one's friends, one cannot choose one's neighborhood. And that while friendship may exist between peoples and persons, which even then are vulnerable or subject to change, friendship between states is primarily driven by the national demands of each state professing such friendship, rendering such friendship very protean in nature. In this context, friendship between states may best be described as a state of relative happy equilibrium between two or more states that have managed to arrive at a mutually accepted alignment or coexistence of the national interest that serves everyone in perceptibly equitable measure. It's always driven by two forces: the force of aspirations and the force of contesting realities one has to struggle again. So within, domestically, you have to come to an equilibrium, and then you have to come to an equilibrium with similar forces in the states around you. So it's not a simple or easy task. On the whole, I think we haven't done too badly. The critical importance of foreign policy in the early 70s, basically, I think one needs to look at this, because our essential moorings were laid down in the early 70s by our founding father. And they were based on several points: respect for each other's sovereignty, independence, and mutual respect, non-interference in each other's internal affairs, a deep and abiding commitment to non-alignment based on the principles of peaceful coexistence and friendship to all, avoiding being caught in the jaws of competing powers regionally or globally, even, and he's declared it once or twice in his public speeches, aspiring to become a Switzerland of the East. Being one of the largest Muslim countries in the world, fostering close relations with all Muslim countries, to support the right of struggling people everywhere to self-determination and taking control of their own destinies, an abiding commitment to ensuring universal peace based upon justice for all peoples, to combat the scourges of poverty, hunger, disease, illiteracy, and unemployment, and most importantly, to build national resilience and self-reliance among his own people and of his newly born state to be able to stand the test of time. 50 years later today, the wheels of history have turned full circle. The world is again in the grip of another Cold War which is brewing, with a somewhat different configuration of protagonists and antagonists, still in the process of kaleidoscopically fluctuating alliances. Peering at us all globally today are a range of deeply divisive forces, some new, some malevolent offspring of the old. We see conflicts still raging between nations, indirectly and directly. On our western horizon, in our immediate regional neighborhood, we are witnessing live and internal churning, evocative of a darkly forbidding resurgence of the divisive narrative of the 30s that drove and tore the subcontinent apart, and that will not leave any country in the neighborhood untouched. The cold, hot conflict between our fraternal twins, India and Pakistan, is much worse than it was at that time of our independence. The dangers exacerbated by the both being armed to the teeth, primarily against each other, with conventional and, more dangerously, nuclear weapons. Craning further west, at one stage of separation, we see our first cousin, Afghanistan, with whom we had enjoyed excellent fraternal relations at the time of our birth, now plunging into uncertain implosion with the previous established government overthrown chaotically by the Taliban. Panning further west, we see horrendous effects on multitude of innocents caused by the continuing hostility between the states that control the heartland of fossil fuel reserves of the world, the Persian Gulf. The continuing war fought at distance between two major Gulf powers, Saudi Arabia and Iran in Yemen, shows no sign of abatement, being culturally and ideologically inimical to each other, even though professing to share the same faith. An extension of this struggle magnifies and becomes more intangibly complex, moving further west in what is known historically as the Levant. Shifting our lens further west-northwest, we see new ideological or ideational struggles manifested in severe churnings domestically as well as across borders in the larger European arena, with Ukraine burning and reeling from Russian assault, perhaps dashing whatever dreams some had harbored of a united Europe emerging into a clustered superpower that could have acted as a buffer power. If the flames of the current proxy war in Ukraine are not doused quickly, they may well transform into World War III that no one wants, with Europe once again becoming the hapless main theater. A differently resurgent Russia today is still chafing psychologically at national level at having been cut down to size by its erstwhile arch-rival, the United States. Still is taking jibes and swipes at its rival that become the lone standing global superpower. In the USA, we witness a surreal revival of the Civil War syndrome playing itself out uneasily, with a sharply and viscerally divided polity pitted against each other, short of being dug in trenches with bayonet-fixed guns pointed at the enemy. Swiveling our gaze to our west, and we are all doing this standing in Bangladesh. We are looking at the globe around us, panning out. We see our immediate neighbor Myanmar, with whom we had fairly good relations in the 70s, in the throes of imminent implosion and possible state failure. An implosion that will be followed by the probable explosion of multiple cluster bombs that will not leave any of its neighboring states, including a relatively stable ASEAN group, untouched. Bangladesh is already bearing the cost by sheltering over 1 million refugees or Rohingyas from Myanmar. Further to the northeast, we see the rising red star of China, its eyes resolutely set now to inexorably taking on role in the 21st century as the world's largest economy and new superpower in waiting and nudging aside the superpowers of the 20th century. We glimpse a still divided Korean peninsula, one nuclear-armed, both with different ideologically antagonistic allies, and a struggling Taiwan trying to evade falling gravitationally into the mainland China's lap. All these views do not lend any sense of composure in us. And so here we are, geostrategically caught squarely in the middle, with the rising but internally troubled power that is India, which surrounds us on all sides, and the next new superpower that is China, geographically located at one stage of separation for us, both engaged now in vigorous shadow boxing and a very risky brinkmanship in the deadly arena located in the Himalayan heights. Compounding all the above is the inescapable fact that global warming and its deleterious effects on climate change have pushed Bangladesh into the list of most vulnerable countries globally. This last imminent danger of existential consequence for us all fuels our leadership role in all climate-related fora and strive for a minimum regional cooperation pending the more difficult task of global convergence on issues. Today, the focus of attention by all major, middle, or minor powers has pivoted to Asia. Contextually, the Indo-Pacific region is strategically at the heart of Asia. If in our mind's eye we can disembody ourselves and reimagine our planet viewing it from outer space, we would see an oceanic planet with 71% of its surface immersed in deep waters. We would see our location as being uncomfortably at the epicenter of this oceanic world. This heightens perception of us being of strategic importance. The increasing attention of Bangladesh emanates from it being perceived as a bridging nation located at Asia's very epicenter, so to say. But this also lays us open to vulnerabilities as never before. Bangladesh's prosperity is and will continue to be derived from this bridging role, and will also depend on its ability to maintain the best of relations with all countries, whether located near or far from it. Our salvation lies in hewing to the fundamental moorings of a foreign policy that had been laid by Bangabandhu in the earliest years of our independence. We must adhere without wavering to the bedrock principle of friendship to all with malice towards none. We cannot afford to align ourselves with anyone against anyone. On the contrary, the current diverse challenges described, which I have just described above, all demand compellingly, to my mind at least, that we do in geostrategic and geopolitical terms recalibrate the tools and policies we inherited from Bangabandhu to truly transforming ourselves into the Switzerland of the East, anchored by positive neutrality. I thank you all for your patient hearing. Thank you.
Let me liberate you first.
Thank you. It's always great to feel liberated.
And I always have aspired to be a liberator, so this works well for both of us. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. And friendship to all, malice to none is something that everybody should strive to in these difficult days of geopolitical change. I think the story of Bangladesh is a story of hope and aspiration that has led to this celebratory day, and hearing from you the development over these 50 years, the difficulties, the strife, but also the positive ambition to create a nation that can stand on its own and be a friend to the nations is an inspiring one, and I think one that should fill Bangladesh with pride, and I think everybody with hope. So I thank you very much for your keynote speech, and I look forward to the discussants who will now, from their own perspectives, add a shorter version of how they see the role of development in Bangladesh from a variety of perspectives, as well as the changing role of Bangladesh in international relations in these days of geopolitical shifts. And our first discussant today is Professor Jakub Zajakowski from the University of Warsaw, where he specializes in Asia studies. You can stay there. And where he has specifically in the last few years looked at how Asia is shifting, both in global terms and also how the concepts are changing on where Europe stands, where Asia stands, and how we are moving into a new geopolitical reality. Jakub, you have the floor. I need to ask our technical assistants to run down and change the camera view, because as I mentioned, we are live and you will be able to see this recording later. So sometimes I have to just keep talking to give the technical assistants time to do things behind my back. And now we have switched cameras, so the camera will now be on the panel. Jakub, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. It is a great pleasure for me to take part in a very important seminar today. And at the beginning, I would like to thank organizer, Vrije Universiteit Brussel, Professor Kim van der Bort, for inviting me to take part in this seminar. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to focus in my very short presentation on geostrategic importance in the context of Bangladesh. And I fully agree with Ambassador Tariq Karim, who puts stress on this geostrategic dimension when you talk about limitations made by geostrategic circumstances during the Cold War. So in the context of, if we take into account the geostrategic factors, we could identify, as you told, two periods. The first period from the independence of Bangladesh till the end of the Cold War, and the second phase is after Cold War. as I told, during the Cold War, we could describe this period when geostrategic factors, circumstances have limited the role of Bangladesh. And you mentioned mostly about India-Pakistan competition and also logic of the Cold War logic, competition between the United States and the Soviet Union. But I would add one more aspect. It is generally not only Bangladesh, but South Asia was not treated as a real important place in this geopolitical competition between Soviet Union and United States during the Cold War. If we take into account the concept of Asia Pacific during the Cold War, the most important was East Asia, Pacific, and Southeast Asia. South Asia was not treated as a part of Asia Pacific. So I think it was the biggest challenge also for Bangladesh. Bangladesh was located in South Asia. South Asia was on the periphery of global politics, and South Asia was not treated as a real part of Asia-Pacific region area. If we take into account the most important elements of Asia-Pacific during the Cold War, so United States system of alliances, no place for Asia. South Asia, no place for Bangladesh. United States had the agreement, alliance with Japan, South Korea, Taiwan. So Bangladesh and South Asia didn't play any role in the security architecture. If we take into account economic elements of economic elements which constitute Asia Pacific during the Cold War, so economic interdependence. Can we see South Asia and Bangladesh on this map? No, because it was interdependence mostly between Southeast Asia, United States, and Japan. So during the Cold War, the geostrategic circumstances have limited the aspirations and the role of Bangladesh. Situation has changed after Cold War, and I would like to identify 4 phases. The first phase from 91 till 98, the second phase 99-2014, the third phase 2014 till 2022, and the last it is after 24 February 2022, after Russian invasion on Ukraine. And if we take into account the first phase, 91-98, of course, it was connected with India new policy towards South Asia, with economic changes in India, but also in the context, most South Asian countries started economic reforms. But still, South Asia was not treated seriously as an important part of Asia Pacific. Situation has changed after 1998 when we have nuclear tests in Pakistan and India, Pakistan, but also Ambassador mentioned about economic, better and better economic indicators of Bangladesh. So most decision makers started to treat South Asia as an important place in Asia Pacific, and especially the significance of South Asia and Bangladesh, I think we could start to see after 2005, after 2006, and it was connected with the competition between India, United States, China, great power politics in the context of the Bay of Bengal. Bay of Bengal has become very important area of competition, but in this period still Bangladesh has played more and more important role, but it was one challenge, one problem. As most of you know, Bangladesh didn't still have a solution in the context of maritime boundary. And the situation has changed, and it is the third period, third phase after 2013-14. From one side, Bangladesh resolved successfully maritime boundary, and we could say that Bay of Bengal started to be one of the reference points in the strategic policy of Bangladesh after 2014, but in the same time we have a new policy of China in Indo-Pacific, more assertive policy of China. China decided not to follow low-profile strategy, but decided to be more assertive, and the best evidence is Belt and Road Initiative and a lot of projects, Chinese project in South Asian states, infrastructure project, also in the context of Bangladesh. It was more and more project, and from overside, it was the time when we are witness of emergence of Indo-Pacific concept. Indo-Pacific concept, it is very, very political concept. It is some kind of alternative to Chinese-led order in Asia Pacific. And of course, maybe we'll have time during the debate discussion, but of course, it was not only a challenge for Bangladesh, but for most countries in Asia Pacific. From one side, Bangladesh, but also for New Zealand, for Australia, how to balance from one side, and for European Union. We are going also to talk about European Union, how to balance good economic relation with China, and of course it was bigger and bigger awareness that China is a challenger, that China has a change policy strategy, and in the Pacific, and China would like to be more active in this region. In this context, the location of Bangladesh has become a very important asset of Bangladesh. As I fully agree with Ambassador Karim, 20, 30 years ago, it was a big problem location, and nowadays Bangladesh could use this location to increase their own role in security structure, not only in South Asia, but broader in Indo-Pacific. Why Bay of Bengal is so important? Only one thing in the context of why China is so interested in activity in Southeast Asia and also in South Asia. If you look at the map, and if you look at the China, usually we talk about Malacca dilemma. But it is not only Malacca dilemma. China, if you look at the map, you could see that China does not have direct access to ocean. And it is a challenge. India has China does not have, and that's why this area is important. And because I have 45 seconds, so 2014, 22. So challenge, the importance of this area, it is connected with competition between Quad, Belt and Road Initiative, US-led order, China-led order. So I think we'll have time to discuss during the debate. But in my opinion, a real challenge, and also a big challenge for Bangladesh, it is how to behave, what kind of policy Bangladesh should follow after 24 February 22. Why? Because one of the elements of Indo-Pacific concept is rules-based order. And usually people think, oh, it's only on the paper. It is, and you need to respect the law, you need to respect international law. Of course, before 24 February, it was in the context of disputes in South China Sea. And also India and the most Asian countries who were against China underline this element. But now it is a big challenge for most countries how to behave in the context of Russian aggression against Ukraine, where we have its evidence of breaking violations of international law. And it is, and in this context, when we talk about values, when we talk about liberal democratic values, so I think that it could be, and I will be very also interesting to have your opinion, if Bangladesh will not have to choose between US-led order, liberal order, and China. And I said choose, but in my opinion, it is no space for choosing, because you respect the law or not. It is nothing to do with choice. So I think it is a big challenge for Bangladesh. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jakub. Questioning the rule of law is like a stab to my heart as a lawyer, so I am certainly there with you, and I hope that Bangladesh will be seeking with the European Union for a way forward that is both mutually constructive and supportive of the international rule of law. Moving on from your introduction, where we go into the geopolitical change, from an academic perspective, we move to Ambassador Tering, who started as a researcher, and I'm guessing probably realized very quickly that the impact researchers have is very limited, so moved to the European Commission. She served as the EU's ambassador to Bangladesh, and she's now responsible in the External Action Service for this region, including ASEM and the EU Indo-Pacific strategy, which very closely follows on to the comments of our first discussant, Jakub. Renzo, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. First of all, how long can I speak? About 10 minutes? Thank you. Ambassador Saleh, kind moderator, ladies and gentlemen, it's always very daunting to speak after such a brilliant speech. And I must say I'm extremely delighted to see Ambassador Tariq Karim here in Brussels after we've had very good cooperation during my tenure in Bangladesh. So I wanted to focus my remarks on two things. First of all, on Bangladesh's developmental journey, because I think Ambassador Karim has touched on so many important milestones that I think this also merits a discussion. Because when we hear the developmental journey of Bangladesh, it raises the question, what is the secret recipe? How come that one of the countries, and it has been said, and also in today's speech, a country that was really considered a basket case of development. And I remember when I was 11 years old, Bangladesh became independent after this very bloody war, and I still see on the little black and white television the horrendous pictures of what happened there. And if you look now, I mean, I came back in Bangladesh in 2017 after having worked already for the Commission at the end of the 90s, early 2000s. And already then there was, of course, a lot of development. But I think from the late 90s to 2017, when I started my posting, it was really exponential. And so what is the secret recipe? And I think Ambassador Tariq has already touched upon a lot of things. But I think one thing is we should maybe highlight as well, and therefore I'm also very happy to see my friend Runa Khan here, who is, of course, leading one of the most important NGOs, is the important role the NGOs have played in Bangladesh straight after independence. And I think naming, for example, the biggest one, BRAC. BRAC is an amazing institution, started really to help after the war with humanitarian assistance, and now I think it has evolved into a university, into the private sector. But when I first started working in Bangladesh, again in the end of the 90s, most of our development aid from the European Commission was given to Bangladesh through the NGOs. We didn't go to the government because we thought the government cannot, I mean, these challenges are so huge, it's difficult for the government really to do this. And whereas we saw that the big NGOs in Bangladesh were actually delivering. So I can name BRAC, Proshika, and let's also not forget, for example, the Grameen Bank, rightly a Nobel Prize receiver for introducing microcredit to the ultra-poor. And also, I think, relentless focus on reaching the ultra-poor, and I think that is what's paying off. Number two is, I think, gender and women's empowerment, girls' education, and, for example, not only in the workplace or on education, the human and social indicators, but also in political representation. If you see, nowadays in the Bangladesh parliament, 50 seats are reserved for women. And I think you can see the impact that this gives, standing out there in South Asia as a whole. Do I think that, for example, as EU, we have really given or managed to contribute importantly to Bangladesh's transformation? Yes, but I think not only through development cooperation, but mainly by giving trade preferences. So there is a scheme, I'm sure you're familiar with it, it's called Everything But Arms. So it means that LDC countries can export to the EU quota-free and tariff-free everything, any product except arms and ammunition. And Bangladesh has been able to grasp this mechanism that the EU put at the disposal of the LDC countries as none other country. And this has, I think, generated this impetus into the ready-made garment sector. If you now see that from all LDC countries, and there are about 40 of them, exporting to the EU, 2/3 are originating from Bangladesh, which is huge. So I think this, if you see also the empowerment, again, it has given to female workers. And I'm not saying that this is all a rosy picture. I mean, we can all remember in 2013, the Rana Plaza disaster, etc. But we've also worked with Bangladesh to tackle this. But this has been, I think, a major milestone. So climate change, yes, I think it's... Again, it's not always a rosy picture, and Ambassador Tariq really pointed it out very brilliantly in his speech. Bangladesh, it's always said that those countries like Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, through no fault of their own, have become the most vulnerable. So here again, I see what I see in Bangladesh is a long-term vision to tackle this. I'm talking here about the Delta Plan, which is a plan that looks forward to 2100, so the end of this century. Me, myself, being a Dutch national, I'm of course very much delighted that the Netherlands are stepping in here also with technical assistance, because we've had our own Delta Plan, which was completed not so long ago. Of course, we had different means than Bangladesh has now. And also, I think there is a different thinking on how to deal with deltas. It's moving, and maybe Runa, with your work on the chars, you can say more about that. So yeah, I think there is a lot still to do together between EU and Bangladesh, and I think it will be ever more important. And in that sense also, I wanted to just say that we signed our cooperation agreement with Bangladesh in 1973. So this means that next year we have another Golden Jubilee coming up, 50 years of official cooperation between the European Union and Bangladesh, and I hope that we can together look at something to make this very memorable. So this on Bangladesh itself. Now on the neighborhood, I think there are, of course, challenges very astutely pointed out by the former speaker. I think here also Bangladesh has a growing role. We can see already, for example, now the chairmanship of the Indian Ocean Rim Association. Also, congratulations, because one of Bangladesh's top diplomats has been nominated as Under-Secretary to the United Nations. But I think, again, let's look at the Indo-Pacific. Bangladesh, of course, will have an important role to play, and I have 2 minutes left. So let me just point out that the European Union has launched an Indo-Pacific strategy on 16th of September last year. You can see this on our EU website. There's a lot we want to tackle on this. Basically, it's not a strategy that is against China. It's a strategy that is inclusive. And it has a lot of priority areas. I don't know if I have time, but basically, we're looking, of course, at the rules-based order. We look at trade. We look at climate change. And basically at an open and free Indo-Pacific. Again, with multilateralism being under threat, it is more and more important to cooperate here. And I would just like to end that Ukraine, seen maybe from Bangladesh or from the Indian subcontinent, may be a far away show, but it is relevant for the whole world. And therefore, we need to step up in the multilateral context. And there again, I'm very encouraged that Bangladesh has voted twice yes on the Human Rights Council. So I think there also Bangladesh is stepping up its role. So thank you. I want to end here.
Thank you, Ambassador Tering. It is heartening to hear the success story of Bangladesh engagement with our Everything But Arms initiative from the European Union. Very few countries have been able to do this. Most of them have struggled to deal with import standards into the EU, to reach the required product specifications that we need, which is one of the reasons why most LDCs have not been able to really engage with this. But I think there Bangladesh is an example for many on how to find out which products and which sectors are feasible and how to meet the product standards, which is one of the big challenges with Everything But Arms. So that success story is nice to hear. The positive engagement of Bangladesh in terms of the rule of law, but also our shared engagement in reshaping the global order and in finding new ways of collaborating in changing circumstances is something that I hope will be a journey that we go on into the future. Our next discussant is Seth Oldnixon. He is the founder of Liberty South Asia. He is an engaging storyteller with publications both in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Foreign Affairs, multi-award winner, I can say. And he's going to talk to us about the political and ideological underpinnings and the story of Bangladesh after its independence, both Bangladesh itself and its peers. So looking at the neighborhood.
Thank you very much.
Just take this here.
First, I'd like to thank you and thank the university for the opportunity to really talk about a story that I think is really remarkable. And I think one of the most maybe remarkable things about it is how little it's told, considering how remarkable it is. And I think to truly understand just how remarkable Bangladesh is, we have to consider where the country began its journey. And Ambassador Karim described this in some detail. I want to kind of wrap it a little bit in a more comparative view. So at the time of independence, prior to Bangladesh's independence, West Pakistan had both inherited infrastructure from the pre-independence days, but then it continued to invest in building infrastructure in West Pakistan. It really engaged in a discriminatory allocation of foreign exchange earnings and foreign aid to build up West Pakistan, often at the expense of what was then East Pakistan. So when Pakistan gained its independence, it was suffering from a notable economic imbalance, but this wasn't even the worst of it. On the 14th of December in 1971, 2 days before the end of the War of Independence, Pakistan's military attempted to permanently hobble Bangladesh by attempting to carry out a systematic extermination of intellectuals in the country. Now, as time would prove, even these crimes against humanity could not stop the rise of Bangladesh. So I want to urge everyone to, as we think about Bangladesh's journey, let's get rid of the basket case talking point that is so pervasive, because I think that really undersells how incredible it was. And let's look at things from a comparative point of view. Because if we do that, beginning in 1971, Bangladesh wasn't really even starting at the same starting line as other countries in the region. It wasn't even in the same stadium. So what it achieved is truly incredible. And let's look at where Bangladesh is today compared to its peer states in the region. So Bangladesh has made significant progress towards UN's Sustainable Development Goals. It's actually outpaced both Pakistan and India. Bangladesh was the best performing South Asian country in the World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap Report for 2021. Again, outperforming both India and Pakistan. According to the report, India and Pakistan have closed only 31% and 32% of its economic participation opportunity gap, while Bangladesh has closed over 41%. And as we know, as we heard already, empowering women in the economy and closing gender gaps are keys to achieving not just economic growth and development, but sustainable economic growth and development. Ambassador Karim also noted another significant recent milestone, which is bringing electric coverage to 100% of the country. Again, that outperforms Pakistan, who's only at 74%. India is only at 98%. And we heard about additional mega development projects like the Padma Multipurpose Bridge, like the Dhaka Metro Rail, like the Rupur nuclear power plant. All of these together have earned Bangladesh a reputation, an international reputation, as a hotspot for global investment. It doesn't mean that there are no challenges. Bangladesh currently generates most of its energy from non-renewable resources. But Bangladesh is not one to be defeated. And Bangladesh has laid out a really ambitious plan to change course, announcing plans to generate 40% of power from renewable energy by 2041. Think about this comparatively. That puts Bangladesh on par with some of the most renewable powered countries in the world, including Sweden and Denmark. Bangladesh, Sweden, and Denmark. And with partnerships with global organizations like Bloomberg Philanthropies and USAID, Bangladesh is putting these words into action. Earlier this month, the U.S. government highlighted Bangladesh's role as a global climate leader. And World Bank Vice President Hartwig Schaefer has praised Bangladesh, noting that, quote, Bangladesh is now far ahead of its neighboring countries in various economic and social directions. So starting down the street from the stadium where everyone else has started, Bangladesh has already surpassed others in the region. So the secret sauce we've started hearing a little bit about. I think the roots of Bangladesh's success can largely be found in the political trajectory that emerged in the lead up and following independence from Pakistan. Bangabandhu, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, the founding father of Bangladesh. If we go back in time, he was originally a leader in the Pakistan movement based on the two-nation theory that postulates that Muslims and Hindus represent two distinct nations. But in 1958, Mujib's Awami Muslim League dropped the religious designation and became the Awami League. Now, this is an important indication of Sheikh Mujib's evolution in thinking, how he grew from seeing himself and the nation as inextricably linked by religion to being tied together by common language and culture. In fact, when Bangladesh wrote its constitution as an independent nation, it became the first constitutionally secular country of South Asia. Today, Bangladesh continues to defy regional trends, not only in the area of development, but in security as well. So, U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken has noted recently concerns about rising attacks on religious minorities in both India and Pakistan. I think everyone here is familiar with this. In fact, Pakistan suffered 170 militant attacks between September and mid-May. Last September and last month. By contrast, Bangladesh's zero-tolerance approach to terrorism and its cooperation with the U.S. in international counterterrorism and CVE efforts resulted in the country experiencing only 3 attacks in 2020, which resulted in 0 deaths, and no Islamist extremist-linked fatality was recorded at all last year. In a recent interview with the Daily Star, the Bangladesh daily newspaper, the U.S. Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom, Rashad Hussain, noted that the Bangladesh government's response to religiously motivated violence last October, he commended the Bangladesh government's response last October, particularly the tone set by the Prime Minister when she offered a firm statement of community and religious tolerance and pledged a thorough investigation into the incidents. He went on to thank government officials for their work condemning communal violence and encouraged them to continue supporting freedom of religion or belief. Think about that comparatively with what we're seeing in other large states in South Asia. It is unique. Now, Ambassador Hussain also went on to commend the government's continued support of Rohingya refugees, which we heard a little bit about earlier. In fact, Bangladesh's position as a global leader here, I believe, also cannot be overstated, particularly at a time when some of the world's wealthiest and most powerful countries are actually restricting and limiting asylum in their nations. While the Rohingya crisis began before 2017, that was the year that we saw over 700,000 refugees enter Bangladesh, fleeing what the U.S. has determined to amount to genocide and crimes against humanity. And today, Bangladesh is still hosting about 1 million Rohingya refugees. So Bangladesh's leadership in promoting religious freedom and its refusal to pursue politically motivated communalist positions in the country positions it as a crucial role model at a time when neighboring countries are reeling from such practices. In one example, Pakistan's former Prime Minister Imran Khan has been describing his efforts to return to power as a jihad. And while this is a complicated term, I think of it in, I have to bring up the words of an American political consultant, Frank Luntz, who says, "It's not what you say, it's what people hear." And following Imran Khan's remarks, a former lawmaker in his party has gone on record threatening suicide attacks in the country. It's abominable. Meanwhile, in India, the rise of religious nationalism is damaging the nation's global image. The State Department's most recent country report on India notes that societal violence based on religion and by religiously associated groups continues to be a serious concern. And recent televised remarks about religion by 2 political leaders has seriously antagonized Gulf states. Now, keep in mind, India's trade with the Gulf Cooperation Council stands at about $90 billion. And millions of Indians live and work in GCC countries, sending home more than half the country's $87 billion in remittance. Whereas other countries have attempted to bolster their domestic political power and geostrategic importance by pursuing these exclusionary politics and efforts to capitalize on regional disputes and instabilities, Bangladesh, almost alone, has demonstrated that another way is not only possible, it's more productive. It yields better outcomes in terms of economic growth and social progress for everybody. Bangladesh has achieved this remarkable economic and social development outcome because the leadership has chosen to focus on building long-term relationships with regional and global partners. It's identified shared interests among all citizens and opportunities to improve the lives of all Bangladeshis. And I think the results really speak for themselves. So in closing, I want to give you an assignment. You're going to hear a lot of things today. We're going to tell you a lot of things, but there's something I want you to do. So at the end of this conference, I want you to go back to your office, to your classes, to your discussions about South Asia. And I want you to look at Bangladesh with fresh eyes. I want you to ask yourself if we've been looking at things all wrong, and if maybe the model, the real leader in South Asia that we've all been looking for has been in front of us the whole time. Thank you.
That's quite an assignment. Thank you for that. Our final discussant for today is Runa Khan. Runa is the founder of the Friendship NGO in Bangladesh, and she is shifting our perspective. We've talked about politics, we've talked about power, but Runa wants to talk about people. In line with the values of the NGO that she has founded, which is integrity, dignity, justice, equality, and hope, we're looking at what is the real hope of a nation, namely its people. Runa?
Thank you very much. Guess how proud I'm feeling right now. Thank you. So I'm supposed to be subcontinentally educated. So it was school in Pakistan and in Bangladesh and university in India. And I get these SMSs from my friends, giving me shots of Bangladesh saying, wow, have you seen that? Wow, have you seen that? I get that. And I wonder, and I think of 1971 when I had to go to Pakistan, 71 when I was in Pakistan, and what they felt about Bangladesh. I feel very proud. So thank you for the invitation, Excellency Saleh, and your wonderful, insightful glance into what's making Bangladesh such an important geopolitical player. And thank you for all of you for making me so proud today. Let me touch on some hidden strengths and surprises, of the people of Bangladesh. We are a bit full of enigma. People don't really understand us very well often. So long ago, mythic times, Bengal was non-Aryan, hence we were considered to be primitive and a weak part of India. Yet, when the Greeks started writing, the historians started writing, they wrote that the strength of the kingdom of Gangaridya, whose king had 4,000 war elephants, and Alexander's soldiers did not want to go and fight such a formidable force. So it hardly credits, it's credible that such a kingdom existed in a primitive society. Invasions came into India, Hinduism, reflecting on Bangladesh, Bengal, Hinduism, Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, conquest, independence. The British came in through India, the British left through India. The spirit of not acceptance is a spirit which is in all Bangladeshis. Norms don't make rules, and we are a nation who are proud. Proud, independent, kind, gentle. Fated to fight, hold and win challenges. resilience, courage, despite the enormous odds that we have. The world must not look at us as poor Bangladeshis, but a nation of proud people who, standing knee-deep in water on an island on the Brahmaputra during the floods, you go to them and ask, how are you? Knee-deep in water, and they say, we are fine. That's Bangladesh. That's the people of Bangladesh. The ancestors of these people, of the Bengalis, have come from what was one of the richest states of India. During the 1900s, we became a new poor country, and then demography kind of bursted to make us into what we are today, what we were in the early 1900s and mid-1900s. We were a poor nation. But since independence in 1971, that is what we are trying to get out of. For pride and confidence remained with us, Bangladesh as a nation, Bangladeshis as a person. And the confidence remains, and we have succeeded in meeting these tremendous odds on a good path leading towards what we stand for today. Success, we have heard about the success, gender equality, empowerment. We really are the leaders in the subcontinent for this. You can hardly discredit that. Our education, maternal mortality, scales any other nation in the subcontinent. Of course, GDP also means construction and reconstruction. So GDP, you kind of take it with a pinch of salt sometimes. Bad constructions happen, bad management happens. It's there. We have to fix it for sure. Yet, IPCC ranks us as 7th for the climate change impact. The loss and damage that happens when every time we make a road and the roads are broken, every time that child cannot go to school anymore, the school may be there, cannot go. Healthcare cannot be accessed. This is a great impact of climate change which we don't even understand can happen. It's not only the people migrating, it's also the interruption of services which are taking place continuously every year. When you look at what happened during COVID is something which was quite interesting because it put the world together. Bangladesh faces crisis month after month, year after year, because 2020, we had COVID, we had a cyclone in the south of the country, we had 5 floods that year. And with all our masks and all our abilities, we had to be everywhere. So imagine that happening anywhere else in the world. We dealt with it. Who dealt with this? It's the people. It's the people who stood there who could deal with this. And, we talk about that, we are basically kind of, we are a very poor nations, striving to become a middle-income country. We have problems. We're not at all without problems. And for example, when you see that we have basically one industry, no middle-income country has one industry really like the garments. We need other industries, but we are building them, striving towards them, and we are successfully working step by step. The vision is there, the ability is there. It's a question of the world also trusting us to be able to take it there. Our average income seems high. Let's face it, 1 or 2% of the people are holding this income. But the point is, that's not different from the whole world. In the whole world, when you take the average, there are only a few percent of the people, 1% actually holds the wealth of most of the country, most of the 80%, I think, of the wealth is held by 1% or 2% of the people of the world. So you see, we can say that Bangladesh has that, but so has the rest of the world. Yet Bangladesh has become like a development laboratory. And who has made this possible? Incredible work breaking norms have happened. It's the people of Bangladesh, NGOs, yet no one could succeed if the government was not behind us. In spite of all the criticism that happens often, within Bangladesh, outside Bangladesh, for the government of Bangladesh, I have to admit that they have supported. We know of many countries, those working in the development sector, know of many countries where the private sector is not, especially the NGOs, are not as allowed freedom as Bangladesh is, in spite of people criticizing that. Regional cooperation between the giant blocks, Bangladesh is part of that, be it the ASEAN bloc, be it the Bay of Bengal bloc, be it SAARC. We fall between the two, between India, for linking India, the center of India with its states in the east. We fall as providing the link for the pearl, the silk route. So Bangladesh is actually, we hold 3 of the ports out of 12 of the whole Bay of Bengal. So we actually are in a strategic position, and we now need to step back and think, okay, where is our strength? And take it from a person, who have been witnessing the strength of the people of Bangladesh. They want to be better. Many countries in the world, Bangladesh really is like a gold mine. The people of Bangladesh are like a gold mine. Can you imagine a world tomorrow where 170 million people can be educated, trained, skilled? Maximum of them would be good, simple people without too much agenda of their own. The potential they would provide to the world as human beings and as a market. 20 years ago, I started a social purpose organization called Friendship, and with 4 promises of saving lives, climate adaptation, poverty alleviation, and empowerment, complementing and filling in gaps in the hard-to-reach, inaccessible areas of Bangladesh, creating innovation solutions, floating hospitals, mobile schools, etc. And 100% of our core work is with climate migrants. We see what the bottom line of what is Bangladesh. We are directly giving service to about 7 million people a year, education, health, financial trainings, etc. They are the frontliners. Every day we see them taking initiatives. Every day we see them survive with courage, year after year. These are the shy, simple, hardworking, resilient, innocent communities who have made Bangladesh a forerunner for the 25th largest, to become the 25th largest economy in the world by 2035. In our last flood, a 19-year-old volunteer called Molida, one of our chores, built a raft carrying, you imagine the river Brahmaputra, it can go like 20, 30 kilometers, at a river flowing at 10 knots. And she made a banana plant raft and carried 45 women and children to the mainland for safety. This constitutes the real essence of the people of Bangladesh. Breaking odds. Our children in these schools staying in sheds, one shed with cows and their family, are now today going to international universities. They have learned with teachers who are all below metric, below high school. They haven't passed their high schools. ICT for their own high schools. They have learned through, we have internet connectivity. And they're now in international universities, national universities. So imagine the motivation, having 170 million people with motivation like that around the world. We need better communication. I mean, for sure Bangladesh needs that. I think we don't do enough. We don't say enough. Perhaps the very idea and the fact that the way people have looked at us for so long, we hesitate to come to the fore. And perhaps with all of you, we need to break that. We see every day people of dignity. When there are people of dignity, it means all you have to give to them is an opportunity. Once I was like in one of our group meetings, and somebody thought that my border of the sari was torn. And this woman comes up to me and says, Appa, which is like sister, I think your sari is torn. You know, I've got one sari. Can I give that to you? Will you wear it? Now, she probably can buy 1 or 2 saris a year. This generosity of spirit, this kindness, this resilience of every year your home breaking, the very land you're standing on breaking, going away, having brunts of cyclones and climatic problems, having brunts of political upheavals, you know, and the people are there. They're standing in courage. And this, I would say, this is Bangladesh. This is our strength and hope. And the father of the nation, who was a real leader. He was a real leader because he brought that vision to us. And Bangladesh became the first country in the world to become independent because of a language. It's very important to know that because many don't. And it's not because of the religion, but because of language. The spirit of the people is high, the courage is high, and we look at the stars and we keep our foot in the mud. That's how the Bangladeshis work. Thank you.
That was very inspiring. Thank you. I don't want to take this distinguished panel hostage, but I also do not want to deny the room the opportunity to ask a few questions, since this is a unique opportunity. So I will allow 3 questions from the audience, and I will come to you, so, you know, technical things, microphone. So if you put up your hand, I'll give you the microphone, and you can ask your questions, and after 3 questions, then I'll go back to the front and ask the panel to answer the question. If you want to address your question to a specific panelist, please just say so.
Good afternoon. I'll put it on my. Yes. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for this most informative session on the geostrategic importance of Bangladesh. My name is Sarah Karinge. I'm with the Brussels Diplomatic Academy. I am in charge of the African pillar. And so I am really tempted and cannot hold it. I want to ask one thing. The entire globe has about 8 billion people. 8 billion people. Africa has approximately 1.4 billion people. You just rounded up the population of Bangladesh and comes to about 168 million. So overall, that population is actually less than the population of a country like Nigeria, which has about 206 million people. I am thinking about the potential of exploiting the markets both in Africa and in Bangladesh. What has been done, what could be done, what is missing, because I note that out of the 20 topmost partners, trading partners that Bangladesh has, there is not a single African country ranking within those first 20. So it would be nice to see something positive happening there. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this wonderful and very important seminar on Bangladesh, and the organizer and His Excellency, the Ambassador of Bangladesh. There are 2 ambassadors of Bangladesh. One is ex, but he is more matured and more informative than the other one. He was served under his him in India, and so the thing is that we have heard a lot of things about the development of Bangladesh and geostrategic importance of Bangladesh, and of course the time has changed, and the landscape of geopolitics and economic model have changed already for many years, and so the discussion here was very important, and each and every speaker has really spoken very positively, and the last one who was very who was working in the NGO sector, and she has really focused on the main issues. And now I would say that the it is not question, of course, I am in context of economic development and political, I would ask one thing, if it is possible that the Bangladesh as a country, the success story of Bangladesh as a country, from bottleneck basket to development of such a height like middle income countries, emergence of middle income countries and economic role model to the world. So in that have been possible due to the founding father of Bangabandhu, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman's able and patriotic leadership, and his daughter successively 3 times Prime Minister of Bangladesh. And so what indicates is that the sustainable development can only take place if the continuity of government is there. So I think what is the opinion of the panel that the magic the Bangladesh government and the current Prime Minister, do you think that this is the right path to see the continuity of government under democratic process? Thank you so much.
I will take the third question and then we'll take it back to the panel.
Thank you. My name is Frank Schwalbe-Roth. I'm one of the founders of the German Green Party, and I was the first Green member of the European Parliament last century. It was great. I learned so much about Bangladesh. Thank you very much. But a little bit it was for me like a funeral. Why? Because on a funeral you only speak positive things about the person who passed away. No country has only positive things, first, and second, I'm totally sure Bangladesh has a very bright future. Therefore, I would have liked if you would have mentioned what happened, when was it, in April 2013, the garment factory with more than 1,000 people killed. What lessons to learn out of this for the future? Thank you.
Thank you very much. It is not a funeral, it is a celebration, and that has something to do with the fact that we are emphasizing achievements.
Yeah, sure. But
The positive.
Sure, but if there would be such a similar event about Belgium, where you are from, certainly you would have mentioned colonialism as well. It's a part of the history.
Up until a few years ago, we certainly would not have.
Yes!
So this brings us with 3 questions to the panel. One is a comparison with development in Africa. One is a question about whether sustainable development is possible without development and whether the government of Bangladesh is on the right path now. And the final one is, shouldn't we be more critical also when we are celebrating, because Bangladesh is a story of success, but also a story of challenges. Who wants to address it first? Maybe our keynote speaker should be the first one to address, if you allow.
I think if I got the first question right, is that Bangladesh perhaps has not addressed the huge market still waiting in Africa. Our links with Africa are still somewhat minimal. And I agree to a large extent, yes, that's correct. We focused immediately on our immediate neighborhood, and then, of course, we focused on the European markets and the American markets and everywhere else, but now we are foraying much further. We have sent trade missions to Latin America, to the South American continent, to several countries, and to Africa. There are Bangladeshi entrepreneurs who have taken up projects in some African countries in the agricultural sector, where they're leasing land to grow crops for those people, part of which will come back to Bangladesh for its own food security and also contribute to African food security. So these are, I would say, inventive ways of going into cooperation now. And I think as, you know, a market doesn't happen overnight. First, Odysseus or a Sinbad discovers a land and then other people go. It's not always profitable to begin with. And then they suddenly discover that, okay, this is something where I have something coming into for me, but it also, the local hosts think that it's good for them. And that's how it will work. So I think it's happening in the process. We came to a stage of self-consolidation. Now we are looking at expanding further. I think your question, sir, was more regarding to the political side of it and about the continuity, and is that a good thing, or, you know, is that a questionable thing? You didn't say it quite aloud, but that's how I'm interpreting it, the unspoken words. I mentioned very briefly that we had a history, unfortunately. You know, I mean, I think I need to say it up front. When in 1971, when we emerged as a sovereign, independent nation state in the Westphalian term of the context of the term, Bangladesh was the only homogeneous nation state in the whole of South Asia. 98% ethnic Bengalis, no divisions of language, of religion, of color, of caste, or creed, anything like that. And yet we became perhaps a schizophrenic polity. The contestations are in the mind. It's not in what we have inherited in our genes from our people. That is something which we have got to resolve ourselves. And if I were to apply principles of psychology or psychoanalysis or social psychology, the way to do that is not by, I mean, why has Europe and the rest of the world, developed societies, got rid of corporal punishment? You can't mend a child by corporal punishment. You talk to him, you explain to him, etc. And I think we are in the stage where the world is talking to us and we are learning. And if we have many faults, I'll be the first to admit it. We are not perfect. And we are learning as we grow. That is part of evolution. Man has evolved that way. And when you learn something, when you get a jolt, you take lesson from it and you try to figure out how to overcome that. We are in that process. We have learned many things that perhaps we should not have been doing the way we did it. We need to change that. Now, is continuity good or bad? It depends. If you are not a divided nation, then, you know, continuity, perhaps too much continuity is bad. You have an overall consensus. But when you have such a deeply divided polity, perhaps you need continuity for some time to stabilize before you can lay it open to the forces which will be very divisive. And I mentioned very briefly that we had established a history already. When one government did something, the second government would come and everything, even if that was very good, was, you know, thrown away. Then again, the previous government would cut back it. It would start from the zero starting point again. So it's so much waste of time and energy and everything else. And still, as Runa has mentioned, our success story is in our people. Even if I were to accept that there's no governance in society, yet why have we done so well? How have we managed to do it? If there has been such abysmal record of malgovernance, how have we come from there to here? It's the people. And yes, there were many things I could not cover in my talk. I was woefully aware that there were many holes, but I was sure that people would fill those holes in, and Renzi did and you did. NGOs played a critically important life in the initial phases of the country, in the initial 2 decades. The government didn't have experience in governance. They were never given the reins of power. So they had concepts of how to govern, but they had actually not governed, most of them. And any government in any developing society can perhaps at best cover 30, 40% of the space. What happens to the rest of the 60, 70%? And if you take by comparison in Pakistan, we allowed a flood of NGOs to come in. First, there were international NGOs, and Renzi mentioned. Some of them helped form the global Bangladeshi NGOs today, and we are very proud of them. BRAC, Proshika, Grameen, these are just 3, there are many. But developmental NGOs, they are NGOs in the real sense of the term. BRAC is perhaps the largest NGO in the world. Not any European NGO or American NGO. It's a Bangladeshi NGO, which is the largest NGO, with footprints in Southeast Asia, in Africa, in Latin America, and elsewhere. So the people's resilience, Bangladesh is a deltaic country. That's what makes the people. That's what forms the personality. They have to fight against odds, mostly climate-generated and natural disaster odds, but also problems created by governance. And they are survivors. Survivors anywhere have to have one instinct inherent in them. They have to innovate. They see an obstacle, they have to survive against that obstacle. They innovate and they survive. And I think that is the success. The NGOs are doing a remarkable job in the country. They fill in sometimes more space than the government is able to fill in. Theirs is an unheard story now. Usually when governments are not confident, they allow the NGOs to function. But when a government becomes overconfident, then they see the NGO as a competitor. But still, in Bangladesh, they allow the NGOs to function. I think that's one positive takeaway we should all take. I see a lot of criticism coming about some NGO or the other having been just cracked down upon. But consider that we have several thousand NGOs in Bangladesh. Maybe a handful of global NGOs, but literally several thousand NGOs and community-based NGOs. And out of that, if there are 1 or 2 cases where the government cracks down because it feels that that entity has not been addressing certain regulatory features, then you should not confuse the trees for the woods. And when the last question was what? I forgot.
We have not been critical enough, but I think we should remember that we are having a celebration today. And we did mention, Ambassador Terry mentioned also the tragedy that happened.
Yes.
As you hear the clink-clang of porcelain, you know what's coming. So I will just ask the discussants very briefly if they want to give a response to any of the questions that have been raised. And maybe I can just go down the line.
Yeah. Oh, okay. The first one.
Before you start, I'd like to recognize our another ambassador from Bangladesh. for 7 years as ambassador, the largest ambassador, and and the Bangladesh government has already taken 10 ambassadors from women, so the gender equality is evident.
Wonderful. We greet and recognize Madam Ambassador, but first I will allow.
I've been very happy to answer the last question about the Rana Plaza, because I was then the ambassador here and the challenges and how we had met the challenge, the sustainability compact along with the European Union, the ILO, and also the importance of supply chain. So it was a big challenge, it was a tragedy, and I would say that it's like a phoenix rising from the ashes. Bangladesh, our garment sector is now stronger with regard to the labor standards as well as the factory condition. I'll stop.
Thank you. We recognize Madam Ambassador and we welcome you. Sorry, we have been interrupted. Yeah, well, I guess this is part of the celebration. Since we have been interrupted, I also would like to say that we have agreed with the ambassador that this is not our only event. We want to do more together, so hopefully we can have a dedicated session where we will also look at some of these challenges of Bangladesh and how they have been overcome. So I look forward to inviting you maybe to speak at that event from your experiences. Thank you.
Thank you very, very quickly. So I think the challenges of Bangladesh and Africa are slightly different also. We have 168, 170 million people, 1/4 the size of France. So double the population with 52% being underwater 8 months of the year. So the density of population actually creates a different kind of a synergetic positive and negative impacts. So I think there is that little difference. I don't know if I've understood what you were trying to say regarding, and I think also the fact that we are also grouped together, decisions, etc., are also done together a little bit more. By the way, we are in Uganda also with some of our technical things, so we are trying. Secondly, this is a very tricky question, but I want to come back to a little bit of a philosophical issue. You know, communism has failed in the world, fascism has failed in the world, imperialism has failed in the world, democracy is like borderline. We need to perhaps think of humanity as being the next step, you know, for our goals and our existence. And if we keep that in mind and then think of not either continuation of politics or whatever, but take that as a goal, perhaps for the world, it might be more functional. And regarding the funeral issue, you know, all of us have said, I think, a lot of things between the lines. I think, but the point is, as I said, that a lot of the things that we are criticized for, the garment issues, the human rights issues, the bombs flowing here and there, is it more than any other country? 170 million people gathered on that kind of a platform. How many times do you hear of these issues? We hear of the US every day, I'm sorry, for all of my US friends here. But we hear of US and guns every day. How many times do you hear of those kind of incidences in Bangladesh? You know, so there is a communication thing which I think Bangladesh needs to do also. You know, reality communication. And colonialism, forget it, that's past. We want to go to the future. Forget about mentioning the past.
So I'll just quickly respond to each of the three on the question about Africa trade. Well, I'm not a trade expert, But what I would encourage everyone to do is to look at some of the emerging industries in Bangladesh in particular. We hear a lot about RMG, about ready-made garments, but Bangladesh has an emerging industry in pharmaceutical production that is really quite impressive and is one of the few countries that has US FDA production export approval. So, but this isn't, again, it's one of these facts about Bangladesh that is too little known throughout the world. So I think that there's probably a lot of opportunities for improved trade between Bangladesh and Africa that we just need some trade folks, some economists to kind of focus on to get us there. The question regarding the political situation, I would answer in this way. I think that democracy is very important. I think that what Bangladesh has lacked for a long time is an opposition that has been able to provide an alternative based in good governance. And if you look back to the very first military dictator in Bangladesh, he did not have a natural constituency, so who did he reach out to try to form alliances in order to build out a voting bloc? And it was Islamists. It was Islamist extremists who actually did not recognize Bangladesh as a nation or recognize democracy at all, but sought to exploit the democratic process in order to undermine it. And too often what we've seen are political parties, all political parties in Bangladesh, looking to religious extremists like Jamaat-e-Islami in order to expand their vote bank instead of focusing on what is best for the Bangladeshi people. Instead of focusing on improving governance, instead of focusing on those kinds of dalbat issues, right, that are most important. And that, to me, is the underlying question and the underlying thing that is again, gets lost in the discussion about continuity. And then finally, regarding the challenges, so there's a challenge right there. I could talk about that for 2 more hours, but I'll spare you that. But I want to echo what my colleague said, and that's that I do think, and I'm going to say this as an American, like I think we need to make sure that we're not holding other countries to a different standard in terms of pace of improvement. You know, Bangladesh faces a number of challenges in terms of governance, in terms of you know, political participation, in terms of law and order. Are these any different really than what takes place in countries like the United States? So, you know, to me, instead of taking countries, Bangladesh or any country, and looking at its challenges in isolation and taking a very, I think, paternalistic approach, not that you're doing this, sir, but taking a paternalistic approach where we say, why won't you be better? I think I would like to invite all nations to, number one, admit that we all share these same problems. They're all human problems. And instead of kind of browbeating each other about who's worse or why isn't someone else putting out the fire in their home while our house is on fire, come together and work for, you know, to identify, you know, common solutions so that we can work together, sharing best practices and sharing technical expertise.
Jakob?
Very quickly about challenges in the context of foreign policy. So as I said in the end of my presentation, I think for Bangladesh now the biggest challenge will be to continue to maintain the balanced policy between US and US partners of United States in Asia and China. Why? Because the situation will be more and more complicated, more complex in the context of Indo-Pacific. we need to take into account that from one side, the United States is the largest export destination. It's very important political, security, and economic partner for Bangladesh. From our side, Bangladesh belongs to Belt and Road Initiative. And why it will be complicated? Because United States started to encourage Bangladesh, because as we discussed, Bangladesh is more and more important strategically in Indo-Pacific, encourage Bangladesh to be also more active, to be a part of this Indo-Pacific initiative created by the United States. In the end of May, Joe Biden begin this initiative in the Pacific Economic Framework. 14 states are in this framework. Bangladesh does not belong. And of course, it is sometimes we could hear from Washington some kind of encouragement that Bangladesh should be a part of this. So I think it will be a big challenge how to balance in the situation when I think the confrontation between these two blocks, US-led bloc and the China bloc, will be more intensified in next years. Thank you very much.
Just to thank you for giving me the floor. Just to for a last remark from my side, I think I like your idea of giving out assignments, and I think maybe what we should all be looking at is a rebranding of Bangladesh. I think that is needed. Give a different picture. I think, especially the larger public, is still too much looking it through the prism of 71, of the problems, and every time Bangladesh comes in the news, it's always negative. And so I try to do that during my posting as well, try to portray the positive side as well. I think that is a challenge, so let's all do it. Thank you.
Sure.
May I just intrude? And I wanted to add something to what Professor Jakub has mentioned. I think he raised a very important point that he mentioned that in the earlier Cold War of the 70s, we were in South Asia was somewhat in the periphery. Yes, it was somewhat in the periphery, but then Bangladesh found itself as the Berlin between the two opposing sides. We were being shuttled about by one or the other. And the loss of East Pakistan, in a sense, was a body blow to the American side of the Cold War, because East Pakistan was notionally the eastern part of Seattle, the Southeast Asia Treaty Organization. And we, in our initial stage, said, no alliances. We don't want to be caught in the jaws of these powers. We are stuck by that. Our challenges are, I admit, will be much more difficult, because today's world is much more difficult than it was. The same conflicts there, but in different ways. And we have to try and steer between these. I've always said publicly and in my writings that we are caught between, we are like a very brittle walnut caught in the jaws of two nutcrackers. Not one, two. One is the nutcracker, India and China. And the other is now the larger global nutcracker, the Indo-Pacific and the BRI. And we have relations with both. And we have, in a sense, not just relations, we have excellent relations with both. We will continue to have excellent relations with both. That's our instinct. And perhaps we'll say, you two, we are friends with both of you, are fighting each other, come and have a cup of tea with you. We will offer you shingara and mishti doi, etc., and see if we can resolve your disputes here. So we have a leadership role to play. And that is our modest leadership role that we can play. We are also looking at the Bay of Bengal as becoming the sort of new focus, where if the Bay of Bengal countries can start looking at forming a rules-based order for the Bay of Bengal as a commons, perhaps you can apply that as a module for application to the larger Indian Ocean rim and elsewhere. We believe in a rules-based society. That's why we entered into resolving our boundary disputes, both on land and in the Bay of Bengal with India and Myanmar. So Bay of Bengal is now the only water body which does not have disputes. And if we can get together to formulate a framework of governance for the Bay of Bengal, which will include cooperative as well, cooperation between countries, as well as the rights of free and open passage, and inclusive, then I think we are doing something. We are playing a little modest leadership role. Thank you.
Thank you very much for these engaging and positive comments and for the assignments that we have been given. We will certainly take up those assignments. As a final intervenant, Mr. Ambassador, maybe you can come here. Oh, you can sit there, yeah? Yeah, fine. Then you can use the microphone there. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Just on what Professor Yaqub said a number of times, that yes, we are caught between the great power rivalries or arrangements. Yes, we have joined BRI formally in 2016, and at the same time, I would like to put it on record that there has been a very clear, public, broad articulation on Indo-Pacific by the Honorable Prime Minister since May 2018. It's perhaps not that talked about because we haven't really come out with an elaborate public document, whether we call it a vision document or a strategy, whatever we call it. But the broad public articulation from the highest political level, Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, has been that Bangladesh shares the vision of a free, open, inclusive, peaceful, and secure Indo-Pacific region with shared prosperity for all. And you can certainly elaborate on that. Ambassador Karim has clearly mentioned how we resolved our land boundary and maritime boundary issues. Years and decades-long disputes with our immediate neighbors, India and Myanmar. I always say that had this been somewhere in the West, it would have been cited as a great example how peacefully, through the international mechanisms, the disputes could be solved. So we are with all. Bangladesh doesn't have any enemy. And I, of course, would give credit to the current Prime Minister, who is a very able daughter of our founding father, Sheikh Hasina, to carry forward the dream, the vision, with all her efforts and taking people, as Shuna was saying, taking people on board. That's the most important thing. There is an unspoken or sometimes unexplained resilience of the Bengalis in Bangladesh. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. As the moderator, I also have the unenviable task of closing sessions and saying, time's up. You've heard already the noises that come, so I guess you can guess what's coming. Ambassador, maybe I can invite you to give the closing address.
Imprison me?
I imprison you.
And can liberate.
Stick it in your pockets. There you go.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Yes. Thank you. So it'll be very brief, of course. Basically, a vote of thanks. First of all, I would like to express our gratitude and thanks to the Asia Pacific Studies and the chair of Asia Pacific Studies, VUB, Professor Kim, the Brussels Diplomatic Academy, to partner with Embassy of Bangladesh to organize this seminar, which is actually reflective of what we have been celebrating for quite some time now, the 50th anniversary or golden jubilee of our independence and the birth centenary of our founding father, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. I am grateful to the keynote speaker, Ambassador Karim, and all the distinguished discussants. I have the honor of calling them by their first name, Yaqub, Seth, Renshi, and Runa Appa. She's younger to me. That was clearly announced by Frank this morning. So, yeah, I acknowledge that. And Professor Kim and his team, and all of you, you made it happen. You made it, I would say, successful. This is perhaps after a long time that we have been able to organize an event like this in person after the pandemic. So we would continue the partnership with VUB, Brussels Diplomatic Academy. As Kim said, this is just the beginning. We will have many more of similar events, and we would certainly be joined by you, your friends, colleagues, families, and to know more, as my great friend Seth was saying, we need to know more about Bangladesh. Onus is primarily on me. So it's certainly a failure that I wasn't able to perhaps project Bangladesh to the extent where I should have been. But our efforts have been there, and we can see the hall is almost full to its capacity today, and many people have joined the webcast. I was getting messages in WhatsApp and in email, and also in text that they're watching. They might have some questions as well. They're probably not able to ask through these digital platform. There is a shortage of time as well. But thank you all for joining us today to celebrate Bangladesh, and look forward to seeing you very soon in person once again and time and again. Look at Bangladesh through the prism of realism. That's my one-line request. Not always through the prism of individualistic or respective idealism only. We have our own ideology. We know how we fought our war of liberation. 3 million martyrs, 200,000 plus of our mothers and sisters violated. 10 million people took refuge in India during the war of liberation in 1971. 30 million people were internally displaced, and in 1971, total population was 75 million. That was the magnitude of our sacrifice, and we literally started from the scratch. We are proud of our achievements. We are mindful of our challenges. We do acknowledge that we have challenges. As Ambassador Karim said, we are not perfect. No country in the world is perfect. No community is perfect. We are also not perfect. But the journey has been a progressive one. And to make it more progressive, more sustainable, we need to work together within the country and with the world, with all friends like you. So once again, thank you very, very much for making this event happen and successful. Joy Bangla, Joy Bangabandhu. May Bangladesh live forever. Thank you all. I liberated myself.
You have liberated yourself. And the final word is housekeeping. The embassy is offering lunch. We need about 10 minutes to set up. So be a little patient, and we are setting up the lunch, and then we can all share lunch here. Thank you.